Darius Sharif. I am a freshman physical education major, and welcome to my final lesson plan. So, for the unit of study, I am a physical education major, so this would be a physical education unit. The focus/essential question. So, the essential question is how can I assemble the best fantasy football team to win the league? And so students will learn how to play fantasy football. They will learn how to determine and keep track of key statistics, and they will learn how to put together a winning fantasy football team. The focus and essential question part of this lesson is part of step 3 of the TIP model. Decide on objectives and assessments. So those are some objectives right there. So that's part of step 3. The grade level, this is an 8th grade lesson, and the configuration will be for a whole class. Students either work alone or with another person. So for standards, so I'm a PE teacher. We're going to use the shape standards. So I chose standard 2 and standard 4 as I feel that those two standards correlate with the lesson the best. And some ISTE standards, I put empowered learning, knowledge constructor, computational thinker, and global collaborator as I feel those relate to this lesson well. So that's why I chose those. For the rationale, basically, I put that playing fantasy football is a very popular thing to do in America, and it will also help them in the future when they get jobs, as they will be more, they will know the game of football. So if they have like to go out with their coworkers, they'll be able to keep up with what is going on, and maybe like to say that their boss likes to play football or likes to watch football. You will have an extra thing to talk about with your boss, and maybe you can get promoted. Um, so then next I had we will use the internet to create the fantasy football league. Students will access the internet via their computers or tablets. Using the internet will be much easier for students to keep track of their teams than keeping up with a piece of paper. Technology will enhance this lesson because students can easily see statistics on their players, and on opposing teams. After all, it's online, so everything will be easy to look up. Just use Google. That will make it easier for students to make lineup changes. The internet is also filled with many tips to help guide students. So that paragraph right there is part of step 1, determine relative advantage, since I said how the internet is better than not using the internet. That's also part of step 4, integration strategies, because I'll start talking about how we're going to integrate technology into the lesson instead of using old ways, which would be like on paper and stuff like that. Next, we have my TPAC. So this is part of step 2, assess the TPAC. So that's exactly step 2 right there. So I have the TPAC, all the different things for TPAC. Next, we got prior knowledge. So basically, I'd say that if you haven't played fantasy football before, you'll still be fine, as fantasy football is easy to learn. Now, I did say that they need to have a little bit of computer or tablet knowledge, and if they don't, I'll be able to teach them like what they need to be able to access. So I'll teach them what they need to know in order to be successful in this lesson. And then I also have a pretest for the positions, the offensive positions in football, as those are the main positions in fantasy football. So learning those would be essential into understanding and building a good roster. Um, Next, I have the objectives. So I said students will know how to play fantasy football. Students will understand how to keep track of player data. Students will know the different offensive positions. Students will know what statistics are the most important. Students will be able to evaluate different players by analyzing data about players. Students will need to plan to assemble the best team possible. So those objectives is part of step 3, decide on objectives and assessments again, because like I said, these are all my objectives, and step 3 talks about deciding on objectives, which means also just showing the objectives. So that's step 3. Then the next part, we have the assessment. So I will administer a simple test about the offensive players that the football players play. Uh, so I'll do that after the season. So like I said, I took a pre-test before the season, and so the real assessment would be after the season to see if they understood and see if they learned over the course of the unit. They will also write a short essay about how to play fantasy football. Students should include a strategy that they use to build their team and the strategy they use to see who should play on the team and who should not. Then have students put what they liked about the unit and what they did not like, and also what could be improved. And then I will check the results of each game every week to see how the class is doing as a whole. Every team participating in the game is the due of the KUD. And then this will allow me multiple forms of evidence monitoring, learning from individuals and the whole class. Based on the answers to these assessments, I will see how well the lesson went, and that will be part of the understanding part of the KUD. And then every week I will teach the class a strategy to help everyone succeed. So basically, this part is my assessment though. So that's also step 3 of the TIP model, because like I said, it's objectives and assessment. So the assessment goes directly into step 3 for the assessment part. Next, we have accommodation for diverse learners. So here I just have a bunch of different ways that I will accommodate for learners that have like diverse needs, that have other ways of learning or better ways of learning for themselves. So I got ways for engagement, representation, and action and expression. And then I have something for each subcategory. So like access, build, and internalize. I have every single thing there. So yeah. Next, we have the explicit explanation of the lesson. So the opening, I talk about what I will do, like when the students walk into the gym, and I'll also explain like the history of fantasy football, stuff like that. Next, I'll have the main lesson sequence. So here I talk about like so for the main lesson sequence, I talk about how I will teach the lesson basically. So I'll have the Google Slides up on the board, and I'll like teach everybody how to play fantasy football. And then I'll have the kids join the league, stuff like that. And in there, I mention how back in the day people did their fantasy football league differently, and I'll explain how like friends they would have to go to somebody's house for like the draft, because like there's no internet back then, or they didn't use the internet, so they have to go in person to be able to draft their teams. And I explained how using technology has streamlined the whole process and made everything related to fantasy football easier. Basically, the internet made fantasy football easier, and that part helps with step 4, the integration strategies, because since we're talking about using the website ESPN for our league, that that's our integration into technology, because instead of going on paper, we integrated to technology by using ESPN.com. Also, I'll talk about the relative advantage, which again is being online makes everything easier than not being online. So that's the relative advantage. So that'd be step 1 right there. Yep. And then next, I have the summary closure. Oh, also for the main lesson sequence, I talk about like how long the lesson's gonna be, what the goal is. I talk about the fantasy draft, which is important. That will be happening on day 1. And I also have like the think aloud. How we're gonna think aloud, so that the kids can give their opinion on things and be able to have a good class discussion. about what they're learning. Then for my closure, I basically talk about how fantasy football will help them in the real world. I compared it to being a manager at a job because they must make important decisions and put people in the right positions to succeed. I also explain how the verbal think aloud would be helpful for themselves and as the whole group when we do them. And then the written test and essay will help them ensure that they have learned everything they could throughout the lesson. And then I also talk about how the lesson will relate to future lessons on the same unit. So I said the first lesson is going to be about the draft, basically. That's like the main things, the draft. And I say how that will relate to everything in the future because the draft is how you get your players. When your players will be your roster that you will be managing for the rest of the unit. So next we have the SAMR. So I put the non-technology activity, which would be playing fantasy football, like using local magazines. That's what they did back in the 90s. They had like newspapers and magazines that had like the scores for every week. So that's how they did in the 90s. So that just sounds tedious. Like I'm glad technology plays an important part in fantasy football nowadays because I play fantasy football and I couldn't imagine doing all the extra work. And then I'll talk about how augmentation would be the part would be the ESPN part, the technology part. Playing the game on the internet would be augmentation, and that would be again part of instruction strategies. Step 4, integration strategy. My bad. Step 4, integration strategy, because I talk about how I will integrate technology into a lesson. Like it's exactly what that is. And also I include stuff that makes technology better than having non-technology, which should also be again step 1, determine relative advantage. So basically, I say augmentation is best for this lesson because using technology substitutes playing on paper and provides a functional improvement. The following activities will be much easier and more fun with technology. Using technology allows students more ways to make decisions for their teams. It also makes it easier to track statistics that they want to know. For example, making trades or signing players from free agency will be easier with technology. Also, it would be easier to keep track of their teams when they are at home. And technology provides me with different ways to teach students depending on their needs. Also, technology will help students learn the different positions, which will really help them on their summative test. So next I have the materials. So for materials, this will be part of step 5. Prepare instructional environment because the materials will be what I use in the environment. So like the students will need a computer or a tablet, all right, because it's gonna be online, so that's what they're gonna need. So that helps prepare. But then I also have a bunch of different like links to what I have in my Google Classroom, which again, like the Google Slides is exactly what preparing the instructional environment is because basically all the links will help the students learn and get more information on playing fantasy football, which means that the environment. So that's basically their environment right there. Also for step 5, again the opening. When the students walk into the gym, me getting them sit down around the smart board also helps with the instructional environment because that's where they're going to be sitting. So that's also basically the environment. Yep. Then I got the student self-assessment. So here basically to talk again about the test about the offensive players. So they already took the pre-test, and now they're gonna take the post-test, and the formative assessment will be the results of the game. So I'll determine like if there's teams that are like losing every week, I'll be able to keep note of that and be able to help those students find better strategies to try to start winning games. Um, so having the pre and post test for the offensive positions allows me to analyze results. So I'll be able to determine if they learned what they were supposed to learn. Because I'll have the baseline, which is the pretest, and I'll be able to determine if they improved. I show that they learned. Then also, I've said that the results of the essay, since I put they should put what they liked and what they didn't like and what needs to be improved on the lesson. That will help with revision, step 7 revisions, because if I find that students aren't learning or didn't like certain parts of the lesson, I'll be able to revise and make those lessons better, or make that part better for the lesson, so that next time everybody will like the lesson. So that's step 7. Again, so like again for step 6 though, results. So just having the results for the test will allow me to analyze results and see again what needs to be improved, or see if students learn. If I don't see enough learning, then I know that based off those results that I need to make some adjustments for next year. Basically, yeah, so thanks for checking out my video, and I hope you go check out my Google Classroom. I think I did a good job on my Google Classroom, so go check that out, and thank you.